Maria Hoftilling, the co-founder of Story Printing, today with my partner, Holly Amaya, and we're going to be talking about storytelling in job interviews as a personal branding tool. So this is something that's really interesting to me because we talk to a lot of clients who actually want to move away from story, like they're afraid of sharing personal story. So talk to us a little about why personal story is so important in interviewing.
It makes you memorable. I mean, I think now that, especially in the job market that we're in currently, you know, there's so much talent out there and everybody is skilled. I mean, I say this to our lawyer clients all the time, like everybody went to a decent law school. Everybody, once you get past, you know, an initial bump of learning how to practice law, your skill set is pretty much the same. And so being able to differentiate yourself if you're looking for a new position by talking about, you know, what makes you interesting, like what actual human experience you have had outside of just a recitation of your skills or where you went to school, which nobody cares about, by the way. Nobody cares after the first job, just PSA. That's just critically important. And you're right. We see a lot of clients who are like, oh, I don't want to overshare. And don't get me wrong. I'm not asking you to tell a recruiter or someone you're interviewing with your deepest, darkest secrets or like your most shamey thing. But I want to know, like, what makes you interesting? Where did you grow up? What is your family like? Why do you want to do this type of work? Was there a moment when you were 11 years old that you realized that you loved doing this XYZ thing? That's all really critical information that helps you stand out in the mind of who you're talking to.
I think also now we have these like marathon job interviews now. They're over like several days, multiple people, 8 hours, 5-hour interviews. They're insane. And what I frequently think is, if you're even in this interview, presumably you're already qualified, you and everybody else. I mean, that's the reason you're there. So now is when the real fight begins, right? So what's the story that you shared? Because you always tell this story, and I think this is a good story to share about your own experience.
Yeah, so I've always been a storyteller from the time I was really young. My stepdad was a Navy typist, and he had this old typewriter, and I grew up in Indiana, and in the summers it's super hot, and nobody had air conditioning back then, and so I would go down to our basement, which was the coolest part of the house, and I would peck away on this typewriter, and I would write all kinds of stories. And by the way, for all of our younger viewers, back then, you didn't have like a delete key. You had to actually like fill the correction fluid tape and, you know, actually go back with.
They don't even know what that means.
I know, I'm sorry. Just look it up on the Googles. But so that's what I always did growing up. And when I was 11, I decided that I just had something to say, damn it. And I called up the editor of my local paper, the Evansville, Indiana Courier and Press, and I asked the editor, Tom Tooley, if he would give me a community column where I could just like spew my thoughts about stuff.
As you do when you're 11.
Some things never change. I mean, this is what I'm doing now. And that's when I really fell in love with journalism, and I knew I wanted to be a journalist. And that
But can you tell when you told that story in an interview? Because you told that story in an interview, you said.
Oh, I've told that story a ton. And I told it actually, I think the time you're thinking of was when I was interviewing for a law firm job.
Yes.
And I remember a friend of mine saying, like, don't tell that. Why would lawyers care that you were 11 and you asked for a newspaper column? And I was like, well, because it shows that I'm precocious and I go after what I want. And it was one of those same kind of interviews where I'm meeting with like 8 people. It's totally marathon. Everybody who had gotten to that point was intelligent and experienced enough to do the job. And I told the story and I ended up getting the job. And later on, one of the people who interviewed me said, oh my God, like you're the one that was 11 years old and asked for the newspaper column. Like that's so ballsy, you know? So it's just, you never know how those things are going to resonate.
Absolutely. And look up Jennifer Aaker's work in The Butterfly Effect, who talks about memory and storytelling. She does a great job of breaking this down and why that makes you more memorable. But don't be afraid of storytelling in your interviews. In fact, embrace it and lean into it. We'll see you next time.